So where we see ourselves going in Ireland is, in around 5 years' time, I believe that every single bovine animal will be DNA tested at birth. That's beef and dairy, right? You might say that's cracked, but I could also have said to you 5 years ago that I believe that every single animal, bovine animal born, will have an ear notch taken out of it and tested for BVD. And that happened. It's been happening for the last 5 years. Every single bovine animal has a biological sample taken of it, tested for BVD. So all we need to do, we already have the procedures in place to do that, to take that sample, because the DNA comes from your ear. The DNA in your ear is the same as the DNA in the tip of your toes. Doesn't make a difference. It's the same as in your hair. We have that data source that we can genotype animals. We've already genotyped 1.65 million, and we've just bought another 1 million genotyping tests. So you think about that going into the high-value markets, right? We have a grass-based system, both in Ireland and New Zealand, environmentally friendly, welfare friendly, and now we have full and unequivocal traceability, not just of that animal itself, but of that animal's parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. That is a huge, unique selling point against all the other countries.
And further to that, because you've now got a genetic signature on that animal, you can get ahead of the game. You say, well, we know that this animal's got faults, so we can't put it in that position, but we need to manage this, or we need to enhance those strengths. So you get into that precision management of the animal.
Just to address the costs as well, right? So the cost of genotyping is dropping dramatically. If we look at, individuals have 3 billion pieces of DNA. If we look at the cost of many, many years ago when they did the first bovine genome, right? Boeing 747s are worth around $240 million, US dollars, right? If you took the cost at how genotyping has declined, you could now buy a Boeing 747 for $2.40, right? Now, the price of genotyping today, of getting the chip today for us, is actually half of what it was last year, which is half of what it was the year before, which was around 10% of what it was the year before. Well, I'm paying 8% now. The cost of genotyping for me is 8% of what I was paying several years ago. Remember, there are multiple things that contribute to the genotyping cost. There's the cost of getting the sample, right? So somebody has to send you a sample. That's a cost. Has to post the sample to you. You must take the sample and post it back, right? Then you have the companies that make genotyping technology. They have to get the technology. They have to run. Somebody has to run the technology, and then they have to give you back the answers. All of which accumulate up. They extract the DNA. That costs around $2 to take the DNA out of that sample, right? For us, it costs us around $2 to get the sample. You're immediately just accumulating costs over and over. Now, can we automate it? That can reduce the cost a little bit, but it's all driven by volume. As the volume goes up, the cost per unit declines. So as a sector, I think you need to embrace this technology, and in doing so, reduce the cost for everybody.
So has anyone got any data that's got the national herd on what percentage is actually being DNA tested?
Yeah, so we know that today there is 1,680 herds that are parentage verified. And we know that that's a decent data set. We know that there's 25% fail rate in there. So therefore we know when we're adding just general commercial data into a bull's proof, we know that 75% of that is going to be correct to sire, if you like.
So yep. Just layman's terms, you know, simple. 25% wastage, we DNA, where's the 25% difference? Why is there a... Or am I missing the question?
Parentage identification errors.
Even if you're DNA and you know the...
Oh, well, yeah, that's what he's saying, is fixing that.
Yeah. So it's misassignment, in which if you are doing the verification, you're able to correct that. My point is that if there's herds coming into the bull's proof that hasn't had that verification process, that's the impact. The question, I think, as we leave this one in a few moments, is going back to the gentleman in front who asked it, and we had very good support from key dairymen in the last session to say, we now know the value of good quality data. Let's go out and make sure we send the right messages to value that data. So in some ways, yes, it's around the price of verification, but some of it's also around, like, people go into verification and verify their herd because they see value on farm, but we're actually also adding value to the industry if we subsetted that stuff. So, you know, I asked the question, let's have that conversation for a couple of moments. Do you see that? Because all dairy farmers would pay, you know, it wouldn't be an enormous cost, but if we went out and identified the 1,680 sire verified herds, of which there are the sire proving herds that sit in there, and then we cut that number down because it's not just about verification, it's also the quality of the data. Are we entering some of the management stuff correctly, the calving date information, the calving fate information? correctly. Once we identify those 500 or 600 herds, that would be enough, Jeremy? I'm asking the question, is it worth incentivising those farmers?
As one of those farmers, yes.
Yeah. Hey, all jokes aside, like the reality is we value your information. The industry, we now recognise the extra value we can all take from it. Yeah.
You come back to the key messaging from the summit thus far, it's around, you come back and look at cost control and these sorts of things, and the fact that we are now facing increased costs in every corner, industry average costs gone through the roof. Every salesman coming through the gate selling us the same story. I completely agree that there's value and benefit in getting these things right, and in terms of potential going forward, this is clearly one that's probably at the top end of the scale. However, every one of these items we add to our business in terms of function and system, we have to ensure we also get cost control as well. So if you're sitting, I don't DNA test, I haven't done that in any of my herds myself, but I've got many people within the business that are doing it. I think they're bloody mad, but then I'm probably a bit old school. But at the end of the day, if I can see the cost for DNA coming down year on year, halving every year, then I feel like you guys are doing your job to encourage me to get in there and do it.
Can I just add a comment there? We decided DNA 6-7 years ago now, down on the farm. Dates weren't adding up, the breeds weren't adding up, blah blah blah. Anyways, we decided to DNA, the benefits outweighed the negatives. Up to 30% were mismothered, which was just a mess. So, and then that gave us the ability to rear more stock and sell on the market, which gave us that competitive advantage.
And you could differentiate those animals on that basis.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have to say, I meet a lot of those 1,680 farmers who say, I should have done this years ago. This has changed my world. But all I guess we are identifying here is that collectively, we could benefit a lot from subsetting some of that data. And your man over here who spoke a few moments ago, who doesn't have the same personal ambition, he could benefit from your data and your data.
But it also comes back to the guys that are purchasing these replacement heifers. They should be asking, like you should be asking, are these parentage verified? You could be buying animals that have a BW. I don't know what's a good BW.
Well, there'll be animals that you buy a beef bull. Yeah. Literally, you're buying a half a beef. Yeah. So
If you're saying that 25, so if you buy for every 4 heifers that you buy, one of them has the incorrect BW because it's parentage.
that's right.
So the demand, it has to be, rather than a push, it has to be a pull factor from yourselves to the guys that are selling you these heifers. Is this animal parentage verified? And then it should command a higher price. What is the cost of genotyping? Is it $20-$30?
Parentage 25, I think.
So therefore, you should be paying $25 more for an animal who is parentage verified. And what's the cost of a heifer now? $3,000, $4,000, $3,000? All right, we need to come up. We need to come over here. So it's
A number of
5,000 over there.
a number of herd owners just sold their asset in the last 45 seconds. But there was a question straight across from me.
Yeah, I think, Malcolm, you opened the session quite well, the massive growth within the South Island, especially of the herd. That is quite unnatural in the sense of our genetic game. So how do we actually take that to the next step? And I think we've got to understand what we're working with, and I support the data sort of movement. But I think it comes back to how do you on farm in your business actually add value to that data, and that's capturing the information properly. And that's a real challenge, and that's not going to be solved because it requires a human.
Yeah.
So, in my point of view, coming back to the Pasture Summit theory, I think our value add at the moment, and it's a journey that we're going to be on, is actually pasture based. And the next step after that will be the transparency within the whole supply chain of where that animal came from, the validation of what went into that litre of milk. But we've got to start somewhere, and I think it starts with pasture.
So I
I think
guess
genetics is another, it's a vital part of it, but there's a lot of human behaviour that goes into quantifying.
Jeremy?
So yeah, the reality is, well, I have been a farmer myself. Actually, in the spring, trying to do everything and do it well is a big challenge, and that's where we see the data quality around that entering the calving data in there. And you're never going to be able to get every single one doing it perfectly. It's just not realistic. And I guess the point is that if we had 500 to 1,000 that were doing it well, they're driving it. Driving rates of genetic gain, that's what we need, and giving them some incentive by cheaper parentage verification or something in there to say, okay, you're doing it well. So rather than this at the moment, like you've got the environmental side, it's all stick. Yeah, get a carrot to say, okay, I want to do this well. I'm already probably doing it well, some of them. Yeah, saying, okay, you're driving rates of genetic gain and really getting that flow in there. And you don't have to treat. You've got 10,000 farmers. Everyone's different. They've got challenges. You've got staffing issues and all that sort of stuff. You're just not going to get it right at times. So we're not hammering the farmers because we know the challenges. But to drive rates of genetic gain in your herd to get more profit, we need that core of data really driving it forward.
I think until you've got a market that's willing to pay more,
Yeah.
the incentive behind farm gate is not going to be
That's right.
massive.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Greenlee Meats, they've just done a first blockchain shipment of beef. Don't let the sheep and beef boys beat us, man. It's crazy.
Well, it's actually interesting you bring up that point, because in sheep and beef in Ireland we have this issue. So we have developed a flock and a herd quality index, which is a function of your data. So again, the carrot is from within. So if you're demanding bulls from a high quality index herd, then the farmer actually has to generate the high quality data. He has the parentage verified, so you know the product that you're getting. So like again, goes back to the heifers. If you're buying, for every fourth heifer you're buying, one of them is actually doing incorrect BW. Now it could be higher or it could be lower. Chances are, in beef anyway, they overestimate the bull that they actually use. And they put it down as an easy calving bull, and then when you buy it, when the dairy farmer buys it, puts it on his cows, and they're all coming out the side. Right? So there has to be a demand from within the sector for these high quality, only genotyped heifers. Right?
Okay, now I'm going to bring the guys over to this side of the board in a few moments, and Donnagh's going to lead a little bit of conversation around the aspects that make up the EBI. But before we do, are there any other questions before we leave your right? What's missing? Is there enough emphasis going into certain areas there? What are we missing? Yep.
Right, I'll just go on reproduction. This is first year share milking, sorry. First year, share milking, actually first year full-time dairy farming, 1,300 and something cows. But the last 20 years I've been in the pig industry, which has actually helped me quite a lot through this year so far. Now when I first started pigs in the early 90s, your conception rate was, if you got 75% on a purebred herd, you were quite wrapped with that. It was pretty good. But now, it has now surpassed using boars, so everything's AI'd. And when I left the pig industry a couple of years ago, you had to get 96%, 96 to 98% conception rate. Right? Now, with cows, here's me sitting up on the back of the rotary, 3 weeks, next thing all these returns are coming around. I'm going, shit, what's going on here? Worked it out. Every cow that's doing it's cost me around about $300 with extra winter grazing and loss of milk next year. The LIC person comes in and says, oh no, that's actually not too bad. That's like a 68% non-return rate you're getting. You're doing very well. Well, I think it's shit. And that is a hell of a lot of money. When I see 13 that come around in a day, that's like $4 grand. Next year, bang, gone. What are you doing about it?
Point. So look, as we open that up, as we did, I'll make the same comment, Donagh and Jeremy, as I did in the last session. It wasn't a light-on moment, but it was a moment that I recall very, very well, and it came 6 months ago. I was co-presenting with one of our directors at an event in Darfield. There may have been the odd person here that was at that, but anyway, we worked out that there was around about, give or take, about 35,000 cows represented in the meeting, and when we had a quick whip around when we were chatting about the challenge of reproduction, we reckon the average empty rate in the room was somewhere between 18 or 19%. Now I know that on MINDA the average replacement rate in the wider Canterbury region that year was 19.6. These numbers are getting very tight, aren't they? You know, and so we have an issue here that we've got to work with really quickly, because the 68 becoming 70 or 72, even just these incremental little gains on 1,300 cows actually delivers a significant amount. You calculate, which is why I enjoy my role now being involved in more of an industry level, is you move the 6-week in calf rate by 4 or 5% across a 4.9 million cow population, and this is worth getting out of bed in the morning for. It's something we've really got to capture, because if we're going to milk these cows for 1 to 1.5 extra lactations, then we need good reproduction, good longevity. But remember, as I hand on to Jeremy, this is not just a genetic aspect. There is a lot of other things playing out as well that lead to that number.
How are you going to get it to 90? Because that's where it should be. The AI and the cows, they've been doing the same thing for 30 years. Is there another way of doing it? You know, has anybody come up and said, well, we can do it this way, and we can increase your non-return rate by 30%? You know,
We should be milking pigs.
Yeah, because there's a biological consideration here. There's a biological consideration of pastoral, even, doesn't matter what the farm system is, bovine dairy cows achieving 90% conception. Don't hold your breath, right? But let's set the bar at where we want to go. Industry target of 78.
78, I think, is been the
Yep.
target, and
Yep.
yeah, it's been bopping around that 68%, really not going. And it's the induction thing. Obviously, you don't have that now as a tool in your toolkit. The mating period is shorter. So, undoubtedly, certainly what we've found in that high low fertility study, and even when we look at the data, there's certainly a very strong case to put a greater weighting on fertility, because that is one of your big tools in your toolkit. So that's not necessarily the economic value, it's getting a more precise, a more spread out breeding value, and then you using those aggressively. And certainly there's herds where we've looked and we said, okay, if you're a low fertility herd, how much bang for your buck do you get out of the fertility breeding value? And so say you've got a high fertility herd, phenotypic, like 80% type thing, versus someone that's around 60%, they almost get 200% of the value of that one breeding value unit through the fertility breeding value. So they should be upweighting it because there's either management issues or inherent poor genetics in that herd to do it. So certainly, we've still got really the foot on the gas for reproduction and improving that side of things. But like Malcolm says, you're never going to get to 90%, because if you start now just zoning straight into fertility, you're going to give up gains in milk and other aspects. So you've got to do it as a multi-trait index to work out what the maximum profit is.
To be fair, I don't think you can compare pigs, right?
Yeah.
So there's a number of different reasons. Is one, you only have one egg in a cow generally to fertilise, and the maximum fertilisation rate, if you dunk the egg into semen, the maximum fertilisation rate you can get is 80%. Right, but you probably have 13 different eggs floating around that core, or in that cell, Jesus, right? You're
confusing time.
Yeah. So what I would like to know is what proportion of the eggs never got fertilised. Also, you're probably using heterospermic sperm. You're using multiple boars within the one semen dose, right? Now, so you can compare the like with like, but where we're going with dairying in Ireland is that, and if you're at the thing yesterday, Mike Murphy showed that by the year 2020, which is only 2 years away now, right? The fertility levels of the heifers born in that year will be back to where it was in 1989. Now, what Mike alluded to say was that that's still shite, to use your own words, right? So we actually need to go further. We're happy with the emphasis that we're putting on milk on fertility, and we're actually, goes back to my original point about longevity, we're actually driving milk production. So people are looking at this and saying, you don't have enough emphasis on milk production. Well, actually, we have a lot more than that says. This is actually kind of mathematically, we hate it, because we have, the emphasis that we put on longevity is actually also increasing milk production, right?
Got a question over here? Yep.
You're saying that you'll never get to the 90% 6-week calf rate. Yet we're just in the last tempo there, and Ireland's target is that. So
We were talking 90% conception rate. Yeah, was the comment. Yeah. Yep.
There's herds that'll get there, but on average.
Okay, what I'm going to do. Oh, sorry.
Question back there, I think.
Yeah, I had a couple. The first one was again on fertility. Do we have that weighting right with how we're actually tracking? Because especially in Canterbury, we're not tracking well. So I guess probably not as abruptly, but what can we do to improve that? Like there's been, like I'm in a high input system, like we're up to you guys in May, and our emphasis is on fertility and reproduction, and we've had good results. But what can we do more genetically, and from a feeding point of view, what I thought was dispelled yesterday, so I was a broken man. And my next question was, like, we bought top 1% heifers that were deep G3 DNA, and I guess what can we do more around marketing, because the top percent when the milk drops, like quality always sells, but we don't really recognise what we'd expect out of them, because yeah, there's a lot of money goes into that and a lot of breeding, like there's 45 years breeding in those when you bought them. So how do we market the G3 better? Because we went up to your labs and that was a very empty lab, not doing a hell of a lot when we were there. So how do we market it better and get more people to do it so it's recognised and actually recognise the value of what we're doing?
Certainly for the record, I think you got there at about 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon, and she's flat out at other times of the day and other times of the year. But just quickly dealing with two aspects of the question there, and maybe I'll just take the second one, Jeremy, that was around the value. So I'm grateful. It's one of the things I've really enjoyed as I look back, Jodie and I, in our farming career. In the 16 years we employed staff, we had 8 couples go share milking and 5 of them own their own farms now. I've been out and helped them buy a lot of animals along the way. Believe me, a cow was a cow. End of story. It was just phenomenal growth. And now, with the change and the resetting of farm systems and the resetting of where we're at from a cow population perspective, we are seeing, and our gentleman over here that talked about his own experience, we are seeing noticeably more interest in farmers wanting to know, like if I'm going to buy a line of in-calf heifers and there's more on the market than what's required, and I've got 2 crossbred groups of heifers and they've both got 140 BW average, and this one I can guarantee who dad is on all of them, I'm there. We are definitely seeing the shift. We're definitely seeing the shift. And you'd agree with that, sir?
Yep.
And it's the same in Ireland. We're expanding at such a rate, you can't actually choose these animals. You just have to buy whatever's in front of you. But now, as the expansion slows down, there's going to be a lot more selection. There has to be a lot more selection. It's better quality animals. Malcolm opened up the whole address with it. It's not about the animal anymore, it's about the quality of that animal and longevity of the animal. The only way you can really be sure about it is knowing the parentage of that animal. Because there's no way you can know the genetics of an animal without knowing its parents.
So I've got a question in front of me which I'll hold for a moment, but Jeremy, can you deal with the first part of the question, which was around the weighting?
Yeah, I guess just quickly on that. So obviously you've got effective emphases here. So this has got the fertility and survival parts in it. So fertility's around that 15%. Yeah. About 7 years ago it was at 5%. So we acknowledged the economic value as being undervalued. Yeah. He changed that. The next part is, I don't think the economic value now, it's our ability, because there's 2 parts to these graphs. You basically multiply economic value by the genetic variation. So I think the genetic variation that we're understanding, so the spread, is not as much, and as once we get a more precise breeding value, in effect the emphasis goes up on that, and we put more weighting and fertility in there. So I'd say that's coming in the next year or so, where that goes up through that more precise estimation through all the research that we're doing.
So I think these guys have explained this really well. I had the pleasure of working with them in the North Island earlier in the week as well, that there's 2 things playing out here. There's weighting within a national breeding objective, but there's also the quality of that weighting that's playing out when you calculate the emphasis that's going in. I think we're going to see, and I'm so grateful for seeing this now with a passion for herd improvement and the value it can bring, I think we're going to see in this next 12 or 18 months in New Zealand some really bold leadership which says, with the learnings of what we've had in the trial work of the last 2 or 3 years, we need to chase after. Stop talking about clean data, demand it. Let's just get it. Donagh, yep, so there was another question right here, sorry.
Yeah, I'm probably Jeremy now explain a little bit where I was coming from, but I was just thinking, did the Irish got it better than us? Because they do have that's kind of how I was seeing this data. Emphasis on fertility and milk are kind of similar, comparing to us that is more milk and less on fertility, and farmers has been going on and on about we should focus more on fertility and breeding and things like that. So if this is the cow of the future, that's kind of where the Irish are going or are on track, and we kind of not on that same path. So that was kind of my thinking, but maybe it's not interpreting the graph 100% right.
No, and it's related to the point I said around that genetic variation, but also you have different milk prices in Ireland compared to New Zealand. You have different costs related to that fertility, so they're never going to be perfectly in line because you've got underlying differences in there. So I think Ireland, they got up to maybe 50% in fertility at one stage, and you change that as you get a certain way on the trajectory of where you are in that time. So it can evolve, and you have to keep pace with all those changes.
Okay, Donagh, can I just ask you to just discuss some of the relative weighting? We see beef sitting out to the right-hand end of explain this for us, because we've got a dairy national breeding objective, economic breeding index, EBI, and there's a beef aspect sitting there. What's that about?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different. The whole agricultural sector, the bovine sector in Ireland will be very different to what it is here. There's a massive integration of the dairy genetics into the beef population. So a large proportion of our beef cows would actually be half dairy. So they'd be dairy Angus, dairy Hereford, or dairy Limousin. So also around 10% of the revenue of most dairy herds across the world actually come from beef. That doesn't necessarily mean the profit, but it means the revenue. What's inside in here is a combination of carcass weight, conformation, and fat score. And if you think about from a works perspective, the cost of processing or deboning an individual carcass is exactly the same, irrespective of whether the carcass is 200 kilograms or 400 kilograms. But if you can see the difference, the dilution of that is actually double. So if you've got a 400 kilogram carcass, the processing cost per kilogram is actually half. Right, and the works are no fools. They realise this. So what you see our value of carcass weight is around $8. Right, I was going to say it'd be similar here, but obviously based on the cost of heifers, it's probably around like 50 cents. But that's so if you differ by if you differ by around 10 kilograms of carcass weight, that's worth around $80. Right. However, the works have worked this out that if you go below around 280 kilograms, there's a phenomenal, this is a cliff-off drop of carcass value, because it's just not worth deboning that individual carcass. And our problem is the vast majority of our dairy animals, our beef from our dairy herd, are not getting over that 280 kilogram carcass weight, which means their value is 0 to none. So if, for example, the Jersey animal, 84% of their Jersey cross calves do not hit that 280 kilogram carcass weight. So the beef man doesn't want to buy those dairy calves because they're essentially worthless. And this is the situation. That's the same situation here. The difference is we don't really have a bobby industry. We don't want a bobby industry, but our jerseys are actually worthless. Right? The second part, of course, is the whole conformation of the animal. So you look at a Belgian Blue, you see the high muscularity, the rump, that's where all your value is, the rump and the loin, right? And the dairy animals are lacking on that rump for good reason, right? So again, if you don't hit a certain grade, then the price per kilogram is actually disastrous. And again, the majority of our dairy animals are not hitting those grades. So they're getting a double whammy. They're not hitting the carcass weight and they're not hitting the grades. So therefore the beef farmer will not purchase those animals, right? Now, somebody alluded to in the North Island, and they're correct in saying so, that the more beef you get an animal, the less milk. And you're in the business of making milk. And that is a correct fact. The more beefier the animal, I've never seen, if you put a Charolais beside a Jersey, you can guess who's going to give you more milk, right? So if we look at fertility and milk production, they are also unrelated. We know that if you select for more milk, you reduce fertility. Yet everybody in this room is probably selecting for milk. But they're negatively correlated. So why did we change the opinion then when we start talking about milk and beef? It's exactly the same situation. But it doesn't preclude us from actually selecting for both simultaneously. Right? The problem with doing it is you take selection pressure off of milk production. So if you're going up in milk production genetically by 1 kilogram per year, if you select for beef, you're now going up at maybe 0.95 kilograms per year. But remember, Malcolm said, and Mike Murphy said it yesterday, it's not about production. It's about money. It's about profit. So if you can sell that beef animal for more, then you can generate more profit in your system. And particularly important also in a period where there's a lot of outgoing, so you have a good cash flow at that period of time. It doesn't mean that we're selecting for these big muscular animals, but what we're trying to do is selecting for animals that will more likely hit the carcass specifications, therefore be suitable to the beef farmer. And then it comes back to the whole DNA testing thing, and this is where I see the real DNA testing component coming into it, is that the beef farmer will demand a high value product from a sire who is good on beef merit, right? And again, it has to be DNA tested, because otherwise, for all the male calves, if the dairy farmer is anyway smart, he'll just put all the highest beef merit bulls on those and pretend that they're all. So they have to be DNA tested to prove to the beef farmer that this is a quality product. From a calving perspective, and again, we have calving performance. It comes back to here, the ease of management. Or like our herds are nowhere near the size of your herds, but calving difficulties inside in it. That's the effect of the calf. We don't want a big, huge calf, but we also, if you select, think about it, if you select for a smaller calf, you're selecting for a narrower cow. So you don't want it over multiple generations for the cow to be difficult to calve. So we have maternal calving difficulty in there as well. Gestation length, we select for shorter gestation lengths, and you know yourselves, if you select for shorter gestation length, there's a good chance you will increase calf mortality. So we also have calf mortality inside that to kind of offset that. So you're selecting for short gestation length calves that live.
Just while we're on that, on traits, and I'll go to Jeremy first, and then I know you've got a view on this one, Donagh will come back to, but talking about correlations and impacts of particular traits that are recognised within a national breeding objective. 4 years ago, Jeremy, we brought body condition score. Comment on how that's impacting?
Yeah, so body condition score was brought in because, like Donagh said, when you select animals for milk production, you naturally get them milking off their back, effectively. Yeah. So we didn't want animals that basically go down with body condition score, then you've got to pick them back up again, and also those animals have to technically be dried off early to get them ready for the next year. So body condition score came in 4 years ago in response to that, and generally been a positive outcome on there. Yeah, it's not a huge weighting in there, but certainly it's in there, so it's an efficiency thing. And I guess that's where we've got that bundled in resilience to climate. So if you've got feed challenges, an animal that's just going up and down, you don't want that. You want to sort of be able to roll the punches a bit and really do the strengths in there. So yeah, that was acknowledgement of that. I guess just Donagh and I have come up with this. Is there other things that we're missing? Because we sit in front of a computer a lot of our time. Yep. We heard things like once a day in the North Island. Bloke came up. Is there others that you see that we're currently really missing an opportunity?
Others, I think.
Others?
Others aren't following us long enough.
Yep.
Finding like 2, 3, even 4-year-olds are dropping the others.
Yeah.
Is anything being done on that?
So certainly we've been looking at that and around this longevity side of things, and looking to see, okay, why do animals go early versus late? And we're finding a stronger signal now with the udder support. Those are the reason why those animals are going later. So effectively putting an emphasis a bit more on there, because as you get cows living to, like we said, trying to get to 5.5 lactations, it's the functional things that start to go at that age. So really just, increasing the emphasis on that. Whereas early on, it's fertility that they go for. Yeah, and a little bit of milking speed and temperament, but then later on, it's those functional things that really come through. So looking to do those weightings a bit more as predictors in there. I think there was another. Yeah.
Just interested in the correlation between the body condition work that you've done and milk production and how they link.
So I think in terms of milk production was, this is a lot.
Zero.
Huh?
Zero. You're one of the only countries that have a zero.
Yeah, I think it wasn't huge. Certainly the fertility body condition score was stronger, something like 0.2, 0.3 I think. Yeah, but New Zealand's a bit atypical with that body condition score, like Donagh says, whereas I think you find it a far stronger overseas.
So interestingly enough, I did my PhD in the relationship between body condition score and milk production. It's around 0.5, minus 0.5. So as you increase milk production, you tend to, on average, reduce body condition score. But that's exactly my same point as what I alluded to before, was the correlation between milk production and fertility is also around minus 0.5. But we select for both simultaneously. And it's the one thing I really love about the BW is this whole body condition score thing. Because it is this ability to be resilient to, it says climate, but it's to any type of perturbation whatsoever, be it the quality of the grass or the quantity of the grass, the ability of the animal to bounce back in that situation. Okay. Now we know that our index, even though we don't explicitly include body condition score, we know that it is actually improving body condition score. So our high index animals are around 0.16 body condition score units on a scale of 1 to 5, so that's probably around 0.32 body condition score units for you guys, higher than our national average.
And Donagh, that would be due to the association with fertility. So animals that are high fertility have better body condition score. They look after themselves a lot better.
Okay, team, we'll wrap in just a moment, but the gentleman who just made the comment about udder support and cows lasting longer from that perspective, I just want to throw into the mix there that there is two approaches to shifting the bar. One of them is the relative weighting within an economic index and so on. The other one, and I think we are really seeing this, and I certainly want to suggest on behalf of LIC as a breeding cooperative, is recognising the absolute challenge of going out there and having these cows last 1 to 1.5 more lactations. So you look at the fact that we need more fertile cows, we need cows that will last longer with a stronger medial suspensory ligament. So all of a sudden that BV that you used to select to needs to get tightened right up. So I guess what I'm saying here is that where we may have marketed a -2 BV fertility bull, -0.2 for udder support 3 or 5 years ago, we cannot be marketing that bull in 2019. So, you know, we can take it in two approaches. And so that is why the breeding companies need to be watching globally, not just in New Zealand, but the information that's coming out, giving us more confidence in the breeding value to not only see it working in the national breeding objective, but also for us to drive the lever harder with thresholds in the way we select the bull teams. You'd agree, Jeremy?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that data that we have for the confirmation traits comes from the LIC progeny test, the CRV progeny test. And I think it's around 50 or 75 animals with that. So there's a large degree of confidence in that there. It's not affected as much by that reproof effect.
So, team, we'll wrap now, and you will enjoy, as we did in the North Island, the sponsored lunch in a few moments. But can I just wrap with the comment of suggesting that, you know, we recognise the best thing we can do as an industry now is look back just for a moment to realise how good the times were while we grew, but now recorrect and reposition to realise we need to look for a new way going forward to identify those gains. I think it's been described today and been identified today that there is significant opportunity in good animals and driving the rate of gain, but also I think the two presenters in particular have done a very good job of recognising that we should be looking at the lifetime productivity of animals. It is absolutely critical. So much more money in a milking cow than a dry cow. Simple as that. So please join me in thanking these two guys as subject matter experts.